Camille Brooks stood in front of her bathroom mirror, hands trembling as she applied lipstick she couldn't afford. The bright red color felt like war paint, armor for a battle she didn't want to fight. In 3 hours she would walk into Romano's, the fanciest restaurant in downtown Chicago, and meet a man whose name she barely remembered. Tyler something. Or was it Trevor? Her reflection stared back at her, brown eyes filled with anxiety. This was supposed to be a simple dinner, but nothing in Camille's life was simple anymore. Not since her mother died 6 months ago, leaving behind a mountain of medical bills that threatened to bury Camille alive. Not since her landlord informed her that her rent would increase by $500 next month, money she absolutely didn't have. Not since her 10-year-old Honda started making a grinding noise that her mechanic said would cost at least $2,000 to fix. "You need to get out there," her best friend Tanisha had said last week, practically forcing her to agree to this blind date. "You work double shifts at the hospital, you go home, you sleep, and you do it all over again. You're 28 years old, Camille. When's the last time you had fun?" Fun. The word felt foreign. Camille couldn't remember the last time she'd done something just because she wanted to. Every decision was calculated, measured against her dwindling bank account. Going to this dinner meant spending money on a new dress, a taxi, maybe even splitting the bill. Money she needed for bills, for rent, for the endless parade of obligations that marched through her life like soldiers. But Tanisha wouldn't stop. She'd set up the blind date with her cousin's friend, some guy who worked in finance and apparently had a great personality, which Camille knew was code for something less promising. And because Camille was too kind, too conflict-averse, too worried about disappointing her friend, she'd said yes. Now, hours away from the actual date, panic seized her chest like a vice. She couldn't go through with it. She couldn't sit across from a stranger and pretend to be interested, pretend her life wasn't falling apart, pretend she was someone worth getting to know. But she also couldn't cancel. Tanisha would be hurt. Trevor or Tyler or whatever his name was would think she was rude. And Camille, who prided herself on being reliable and kind, couldn't bear to let people down. That's when the idea came to her. It was reckless, completely out of character, and probably insane. But as Camille stood in her small apartment, surrounded by unpaid bills and the ghost of her mother's memory, she felt something snap inside her. Just this once she would do something completely unexpected. She would sabotage the date in a way that would make the man leave, not her. She wouldn't be the bad guy. She would be the woman who was clearly unavailable, clearly involved with someone else. She would kiss a stranger. The plan formed quickly in her mind. She would arrive at Romano's early, find some random man at the bar, and when her blind date walked in, she would kiss this stranger. Not a small peck, but a real kiss, the kind that would make her date turn around and walk right back out. The stranger might be confused, maybe even angry, but it would be over in seconds. Her date would leave, she could apologize to the stranger, and she'd be free. Free to go home, free to avoid wasting money and time, free to continue drowning in her problems alone. It was a terrible plan. Camille knew that. But terrible plans were better than sitting through an awkward dinner while her life crumbled around her. She finished getting ready in a daze, pulling on the one nice dress she owned, a sleeveless blue number that her mother had bought her 2 Christmases ago. It fit well, hugging her curves in a way that made her feel both confident and exposed. She twisted her black hair into a neat bun, applied minimal makeup, and stared at herself one more time. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "It's just one kiss. With a stranger. Who will probably think you're insane." The taxi ride to Romano's felt like traveling to her own execution. The driver made small talk about the weather, but Camille barely heard him. Her mind raced with scenarios, each one worse than the last. What if the stranger was married? What if he made a scene? What if her date arrived early and saw her scoping out potential kiss victims at the bar? Romano's was exactly as intimidating as Camille had feared. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a glass skyscraper, all modern elegance and dim lighting designed to make diners feel sophisticated. Through the windows, she could see well-dressed couples at intimate tables, waiters gliding between them with practiced grace. This was not Camille's world. She shopped at thrift stores and ate ramen more nights than not. She was a nurse who wore scrubs, not silk. But she was here now, and backing out wasn't an option. Camille pushed through the heavy glass doors, immediately hit by the smell of expensive food and the quiet murmur of wealthy conversations. The host, a young man in a crisp white shirt, smiled at her. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation?" "I'm meeting someone," Camille said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'll just wait at the bar." The host nodded and gestured toward the bar area, a sleek stretch of marble with leather stools. Camille's heels clicked against the polished floor as she made her way over, hyper-aware of everyone's eyes on her. Or maybe that was just paranoia. Maybe no one cared about the nervous woman in the blue dress. The bar was mostly empty. A couple sat at the far end, engrossed in each other. An older businessman typed on his phone, ignoring his whiskey. And then, 3 seats from the end, she saw him. He was exactly what she needed. Alone, attractive enough that the kiss would look believable, and completely absorbed in the drink in front of him. He wore a dark gray suit that fit him perfectly, the jacket draped over the back of his stool. His hair was dark, styled but slightly messy in a way that suggested he'd run his hands through it recently. He looked tired, she realized. Not physically exhausted, but mentally drained, as if he'd been dealing with problems of his own. Perfect. Camille slid onto a stool 2 seats away from him, ordered a water she wouldn't drink, and tried to calm her racing heart. She checked her phone. 7 o'clock. Her date was supposed to arrive in 5 minutes. She needed to time this perfectly. Her hands shook as she gripped her phone. This was insane. Absolutely insane. She was about to kiss a complete stranger to avoid a blind date. What was wrong with her? Normal people just canceled. Normal people sent a polite text saying they weren't feeling well. But Camille, who spent her life caring for others, who always put everyone else's feelings first, couldn't bring herself to do the simple, rational thing. The stranger glanced up from his drink, and for a brief moment, their eyes met. His were blue, she noticed. Very blue. And kind, despite the exhaustion around them. He gave her a small, polite nod, the kind strangers exchange in public spaces, then returned to his whiskey. Camille's phone buzzed. A text from Tanisha. Have so much fun tonight. He's a great guy. Give him a chance. Guilt twisted in Camille's stomach. Tanisha had been so excited about setting up this date, so hopeful that Camille would finally move on from her grief and her stress. And here Camille was, about to stage an elaborate lie to get out of it. But before she could change her mind, before she could talk herself out of this ridiculous plan, the restaurant door opened. Camille looked up and saw him. A man in his early 30s, brown hair, blue button-down shirt, scanning the restaurant with nervous energy. He matched the photo Tanisha had shown her. Tyler. Or Trevor. Her blind date. Time slowed down. Tyler's eyes swept the bar area, and Camille knew she had about 3 seconds before he spotted her. 3 seconds to commit to her insane plan or abandon it entirely. She didn't think. She just moved. Camille stood from her stool, walked the 2 steps to the stranger in the gray suit, and before her rational brain could intervene, she cupped his face in her hands and kissed him. Have you ever been so desperate to escape a situation that you did something completely out of character? Camille's about to find out that one impulsive kiss can change everything. If you're curious to see how this story unfolds, please subscribe and let me know in the comments. Would you have had the courage to kiss a stranger? The stranger's lips were warm and tasted faintly of whiskey. For a split second, Camille felt his surprise, the way his body tensed under her touch. But he didn't pull away. If anything, he leaned into the kiss, one of his hands coming up to rest lightly on her waist, as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. It was supposed to be quick. A brief, scandalous display that would send her blind date running. But the moment their lips met, something shifted. The kiss wasn't frantic or performative. It was gentle, questioning, as if they were both asking the same silent question. What are we doing? Camille's eyes were closed, but she sensed movement near the entrance. Footsteps, then nothing. Her plan was working. Tyler or Trevor or whatever his name was had seen her and left. Mission accomplished. So why wasn't she pulling away? She finally broke the kiss, stepping back quickly, her hands falling from the stranger's face. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she could feel heat rising in her cheeks. The stranger looked at her with those impossibly blue eyes, his expression unreadable. Not angry exactly, but definitely curious. Camille started, then stopped. What could she possibly say? Sorry, I used you to escape a blind date? That sounded insane. Because it was insane. The stranger's lips curved into a small smile. Well, he said, his voice low and smooth, that was unexpected. Camille wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. I'm so sorry. There was this guy and I didn't want to. I shouldn't have. She was babbling now, words tumbling out in a panicked rush. The stranger held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. Breathe, he said simply. Camille took a breath, then another. The stranger was still smiling, which seemed like a good sign. At least he wasn't calling security or throwing his drink in her face. Let me guess, he said, turning slightly on his stool to face her fully. Blind date you didn't want to go on? Camille's eyes widened. How did you know? Because, the stranger said, gesturing to his half-empty whiskey glass, I'm sitting here trying to avoid a business dinner I didn't want to attend. Desperation recognizes desperation. Despite everything, Camille felt a laugh bubble up in her chest. It came out as a slightly hysterical giggle, but it was better than crying. I'm sorry, she said again. That was completely inappropriate and weird, and I understand if you hate me. Hate you? The stranger looked genuinely surprised. That was the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months. Possibly years. He stood, and Camille realized he was tall, at least 6 feet. He held out his hand. Julian Pierce. Camille stared at his hand for a moment, then took it. His grip was firm, warm. Camille Brooks. Nice to meet you, Camille Brooks. Julian gestured to the stool beside him. Can I buy you a drink? I think I'm owed at least an explanation for what just happened. Every instinct told Camille to refuse, to apologize one more time and leave. She'd accomplished what she came to do. Her blind date was gone, she was free. But something in Julian's eyes stopped her. He wasn't judging her. He wasn't angry. He seemed genuinely interested, as if kissing strangers was a perfectly normal thing people did. Okay, Camille heard herself say. One drink. She sat down beside him, hyper-aware of how close they were. The bartender, a woman with silver hair and an amused expression, appeared in front of them. What can I get you? She asked Camille. Just water, please. Julian raised an eyebrow. You kiss strange men in restaurants but won't have a real drink? I don't drink, Camille said, then immediately felt the need to explain. Not because I have a problem or anything. I'm a nurse. I work early shifts. And alcohol is expensive. The honesty surprised her. She wasn't usually this open with strangers, but something about Julian made her feel safe. Or maybe it was the fact that she'd already done the most mortifying thing possible, so what did it matter if she told him she was broke? A nurse, Julian repeated. That explains the efficient way you executed your plan. Very precise. Camille groaned, covering her face with her hands. Please stop. I'm already dying of embarrassment. Don't be embarrassed. Julian's voice was gentle. I think it was brave. Misguided, definitely. But brave. Camille peeked at him through her fingers. Brave or crazy? Both, probably. Julian took a sip of his whiskey. So, this blind date. Must have been pretty bad if kissing a stranger seemed like the better option. The water arrived and Camille took a grateful sip. It wasn't about him being bad. I'm sure he's perfectly nice. I shouldn't have agreed to go in the first place. But my friend set it up and she was so excited and I didn't want to let her down. So instead you sabotaged it in spectacular fashion. Exactly. Camille found herself relaxing slightly. Julian was easy to talk to, easier than she'd expected. What about you? What business dinner are you avoiding? Julian's expression darkened slightly. My father's idea of networking. He's been trying to set me up with the daughter of one of his business associates. She's lovely, I'm sure, but I'm not interested. Unfortunately, my father doesn't take no for an answer. So we're both running away, Camille observed. Looks like it. Julian turned his glass in his hands, watching the amber liquid catch the light. Though I have to say your method was more creative than mine. I was just planning to show up late and claim a work emergency. They talked for another hour, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Julian asked about her work at the hospital, and Camille found herself telling him about her patients, about the long shifts and the moments of connection that made it all worthwhile. He listened intently, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just making polite conversation. In turn, Julian told her about his work, though he was vague about the details. He mentioned something about corporate management and investments, but he seemed more interested in talking about the frustrations of dealing with family expectations than the specifics of his job. My father built this company from nothing, Julian said, staring into his now empty glass. And now he expects me to maintain it exactly as he did. No changes, no new ideas. Just perpetuate his legacy. That sounds suffocating, Camille said quietly. Julian looked at her, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. It is. The bartender approached, asking if they wanted another round. Julian looked at Camille questioningly, but she shook her head. I should go, she said, though part of her didn't want to. My shift starts early tomorrow. Julian nodded, but she could see disappointment in his face. Of course. He hesitated, then added, Can I walk you out? They left the restaurant together, stepping into the cool Chicago night. The street was busy with Friday evening traffic. People heading to bars and clubs, couples walking hand in hand. Camille felt suddenly aware of how close Julian was standing to her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. "Thank you," Camille said, "for not being angry." About the kiss. Julian's eyes met hers, and in the streetlight, they looked even bluer than before. "I should be thanking you. That kiss was the most honest thing anyone's done to me in a long time." Camille felt her breath catch. There was something in the way he was looking at her, something that made her heart race all over again. "I'd like to see you again," Julian said. "If you're interested." This was the moment where Camille should say no. Where she should be practical and realistic and remember that she lived in a world of medical bills and broken cars, not fancy restaurants and business dinners. Men like Julian, whoever he really was, didn't date women like her. Women who wore thrift store dresses and counted pennies. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw the same loneliness she felt, the same hunger for something real. "Okay," she heard herself say. "I'd like that." They exchanged phone numbers, fingers brushing as Julian handed back her phone. A taxi pulled up to the curb and Camille climbed in, looking back through the window as the car pulled away. Julian stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her leave. Camille leaned back in her seat, touching her lips where Julian's had been. Whatever she'd expected from tonight, it wasn't this. It wasn't him. And as the taxi carried her back to her small apartment and her mountain of problems, she couldn't stop smiling. Camille woke up the next morning with her phone buzzing insistently on her nightstand. She fumbled for it, squinting at the bright screen. 6:30 in the morning, and she had 12 missed calls from Tanisha. The memory of last night came flooding back. The kiss. Julian. The conversation that had felt like stepping into another world. And before all of that, the blind date she'd sabotaged so spectacularly. Her phone rang again. Tanisha. There was no avoiding this. "Hello." Camille's voice was rough with sleep. "Are you kidding me right now?" Tanisha's voice came through loud and angry. "Tyler called me last night, Camille. He said he saw you kissing some other guy at the restaurant." "What the hell?" Camille sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. "Tanisha, I can explain." "Please do. Because right now, I'm trying to figure out how my best friend, the kindest person I know, could do something so cruel to a guy who was just trying to meet someone nice." The guilt Camille had been pushing down came rushing back. Tanisha was right. It had been cruel even if Tyler was a stranger. He'd gotten dressed up, driven to an expensive restaurant, probably been nervous about meeting her, and then watched her kiss another man. "You're right," Camille said quietly. "It was horrible. I shouldn't have done it that way." "Then why did you?" Tanisha's anger had softened slightly. "If you didn't want to go, you could have just told me." "I know. I didn't want to disappoint you. You've been so worried about me since Mom died, and I know you were trying to help. But I wasn't ready, and I panicked, and I made a terrible choice." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Tanisha sighed. "Girl, you are going to drive me crazy. Next time just talk to me. Tell me you're not ready. Don't go around kissing random men." "I won't," Camille promised. Then, because she couldn't help herself, she added, "Though the random man was actually really nice. Don't even start." But Camille could hear the smile in Tanisha's voice. "I'm still mad at you. But I love you and I know you've been going through a lot. Just apologize to Tyler, okay? He's a good guy." After they hung up, Camille sent a long text message to Tyler, apologizing for her behavior and explaining that she should have been honest about not being ready to date. She didn't mention Julian by name, but she was as truthful as she could be about having met someone else. Tyler's response came an hour later, a simple "thanks for the apology" followed by a "good luck with the new guy." Camille felt the weight of guilt lift slightly. It wasn't perfect, but at least she tried to make it right. She showered and dressed in her scrubs, preparing for her shift at County General Hospital. The work was demanding but familiar, a welcome distraction from the chaos of her personal life. She was checking medication dosages at the nurse's station when her phone buzzed with a text. "Unknown number, good morning. It's Julian. Hope you don't mind me texting. I wanted to make sure you got home safely last night." Camille stared at the message, a smile spreading across her face. She saved his number and typed back, "Made it home fine. Thanks for checking." His response came quickly, "I've been thinking about last night. Would you like to get coffee sometime?" Camille's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Coffee was safe, casual. Coffee was something she could afford, unlike fancy dinners. Coffee meant she could see Julian again without feeling completely out of her depth. "Yes," she typed. "I like that." They made plans to meet at a small cafe near the hospital after Camille's shift ended at 3. The rest of her workday passed in a blur of patient care and paperwork, but her mind kept drifting to Julian. She knew almost nothing about him, really. Just that he was kind, that he listened when she spoke, and that his kiss had made her feel things she hadn't felt in years. At 2:45, Camille changed out of her scrubs and into jeans and a green sweater she bought on clearance last year. She touched up her makeup in the hospital bathroom, then immediately felt silly for trying so hard. This was just coffee. The cafe was a 10-minute walk from the hospital, a cozy place called The Daily Grind that Camille had passed 100 times but never entered. Coffee shops were a luxury she couldn't justify. She walked in and immediately spotted Julian at a corner table, looking dramatically out of place in his expensive suit among the college students and freelancers with their laptops. He stood when he saw her, that same warm smile from last night lighting up his face. "Camille, you look lovely." She slid into the seat across from him. "You look like you just came from a boardroom." "Close. A meeting that should have ended an hour ago." Julian pushed a cup toward her. "I got you a regular coffee. I hope that's okay. I didn't know what you liked." Camille accepted the cup gratefully. The fact that he'd bought her coffee before she arrived, that small gesture of kindness, made her chest feel warm. "This is perfect. Thank you." They talked easily, the conversation picking up where they'd left off the night before. Julian asked more about her work, and Camille found herself telling him about Mrs. Patterson, an elderly patient who'd been admitted with pneumonia and spent her days telling Camille stories about her late husband. "She makes me believe in that kind of love," Camille said. "The kind that lasts 50 years and still makes you smile when you talk about it." "Do you believe in that?" Julian asked. Lasting love. Camille thought about her parents, about how her father had worked 2 jobs to pay for her mother's medical care, how he'd held her hand until the very end. "I do. I've seen it." "What about you?" Julian's expression grew thoughtful. "I want to. But everyone in my life seems to have an agenda. My father wants me to marry someone who'll be good for business. The women I've dated were more interested in my name than in me. It's hard to believe in something real when everything feels calculated." "That sounds lonely," Camille said. "It is." Julian met her eyes. "Which is why last night was so refreshing. You kissed me because you were desperate, yes, but at least it was honest desperation." Camille laughed, nearly spilling her coffee. "I'm never going to live that down, am I?" "Never," Julian agreed, grinning. They talked for 2 hours, long after their coffee cups were empty. Julian told her about his mother, who'd passed away when he was in college, and how his father had thrown himself into work afterward, becoming cold and distant. Camille shared her own grief, how losing her mother had felt like losing her anchor in the world. "She was my best friend," Camille said quietly. "And now there's just this hole where she used to be. I keep thinking I hear her voice or that I need to call her about something, and then I remember." Julian reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was simple, but it felt significant. "I understand that. Completely." When they finally left the cafe, the sun was setting, painting the Chicago skyline in shades of orange and pink. They walked slowly, neither seeming to want the evening to end. "Can I ask you something?" Julian said as they paused at a crosswalk. "Of course. Why did you really kiss me? I know you said it was to escape the blind date, but it seemed like more than that. Like you were running from something bigger." Camille looked up at him, surprised by his perceptiveness. "I guess I was. I've been drowning in responsibilities and bills and grief, and I just wanted one moment where I was someone else. Someone brave and spontaneous. Someone who didn't have to think about consequences." Julian nodded slowly. "And now?" "Now I'm terrified," Camille admitted. "Because you seem wonderful, and I have no idea what I'm doing, and my life is a mess, and I can't afford to add another complication." "What if I don't want to be a complication?" Julian asked. "What if I just want to be someone who makes you smile?" Camille's breath caught. "Julian, I know we just met. I know this is fast. But I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that kiss. Not because it was shocking, but because for the first time in years I felt something real." They stood on the sidewalk as people rushed past them, wrapped up in their own lives. Camille knew she should be practical, should protect herself, should remember that fairy tales didn't happen to women like her. But when she looked at Julian, she saw someone just as lost as she was, someone looking for the same thing. Connection, understanding, hope. "I'd like to keep seeing you," Camille said. "If you want that." Julian's smile was answer enough. He walked her to the bus stop, and before she got on he leaned down and kissed her cheek. It was chaste, respectful, but it sent electricity through her entire body. "Text me when you get home," he said. Camille nodded, climbing onto the bus. Through the window, she watched him standing on the corner, hands in his pockets, watching her leave just like he had the night before. And for the first time in months, Camille felt something she'd almost forgotten: happiness. Camille's phone buzzed at 7 in the morning, pulling her from a dream where she was walking through a garden with Julian, their fingers intertwined. She blinked awake, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. "Julian, good morning. I hope you slept well. I've been thinking about yesterday." Camille smiled, typing back, "Me too. Still can't believe I kissed a stranger 2 days ago." "Julian, best decision you ever made?" "Camille, maybe. Still deciding." "Julian, fair enough. What are you doing today?" Camille looked around her small apartment, at the stack of bills on her kitchen counter, at the pile of laundry she'd been putting off. "Today is errands and reality," she typed. "The boring adult stuff." "Julian, boring adult stuff is underrated. Can I call you later?" "Camille, I'd like that." She got up and made herself instant coffee, standing at her kitchen window and looking out at the street below. Her neighborhood was working class, filled with people like her who were just trying to get by. She'd lived here for 3 years and it was fine. Not fancy but fine. Her mother had always said that a clean home was worth more than a big one, and Camille had taken that to heart. But looking at her apartment now, she couldn't help but wonder what Julian's place looked like. Probably enormous. Probably filled with expensive furniture and art. Probably nothing like this cramped one-bedroom with its leaky faucet and temperamental heating. She shook her head, trying to dispel the thoughts. It didn't matter what Julian's apartment looked like. He seemed to like her, and that was enough. Wasn't it? Camille spent the morning cleaning and organizing, then tackled the pile of medical bills on her counter. Her mother's final hospital stay had cost over $200,000. Insurance had covered some, but Camille was left with nearly $40,000 in debt. The hospital had put her on a payment plan, but even the minimum monthly payment was $300. Money she didn't really have. She was staring at the bills, feeling the familiar weight of anxiety settling over her, when her phone rang. "Julian." "Hey," she answered, trying to sound cheerful. "Hey yourself. How's boring adult stuff going?" "It's going." Camille moved to her couch, curling up in the corner. "How about you? What do CEOs do on Saturday mornings?" There was a pause on the other end. "CEOs?" Camille froze. "You said you worked in corporate management. I just assumed." "No, you're right. I do." Julian's voice was careful. "What made you think CEO specifically?" Camille bit her lip. She'd been avoiding this all day, but she couldn't lie. "I might have Googled you last night. After I got home." Another pause. Then Julian laughed, but it wasn't his usual warm laugh. It sounded almost resigned. "And what did Google tell you?" "That you're Julian Pierce, CEO of Pierce Industries. That your company is worth over $800 million. That you were engaged 2 years ago but it ended. That you're considered one of Chicago's most eligible bachelors." Camille took a breath. "And I'm wondering why you didn't mention any of that." "Because I wanted you to see me as Julian, not as Julian Pierce, CEO." His voice was quiet. "Do you know how rare that is? People always want something from me. My money, my connections, my name. But you kissed me because you were desperate to escape a blind date." It was refreshingly honest. Camille felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm not interested in your money, Julian. If anything, it makes this more complicated." "Why?" "Because we're from different worlds. You probably have a penthouse somewhere downtown. I live in a one-bedroom apartment and I'm drowning in debt. You wear suits that cost more than my monthly rent. I buy my clothes at thrift stores. How is this supposed to work?" "Camille," Julian's voice was gentle, "I don't care about any of that." "But I do," Camille said, and she realized she was crying now. "I care because I can't afford to go to the places you probably go. I can't take you to my apartment without you seeing how small and inadequate my life is. And eventually you're going to realize that I'm not worth the effort." "Stop." Julian's voice was firm. "Just stop. You're one of the most genuine people I've ever met. You're kind and smart and brave enough to kiss strangers in restaurants. Your apartment doesn't matter. Your clothes don't matter. What matters is that when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe." Camille wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm scared, Julian." "So am I," he admitted. "But I think you're worth being scared for." They stayed on the phone for another hour, talking through Camille's fears and Julian's reassurances. By the end, Camille felt lighter, though the worry hadn't completely disappeared. "Can I see you tomorrow?" Julian asked. "Yes," Camille said. "But somewhere normal. Not a fancy restaurant. Just somewhere normal." "Deal." After they hung up, Camille sat on her couch, staring at nothing. She thought about what Julian had said about how she made him feel like he could breathe. She understood that feeling because he did the same for her. In a life full of stress and responsibility and grief, Julian was a moment of light. But light, Camille knew, could also cast shadows. And she wasn't sure she was ready to face what those shadows might reveal. Camille was in the middle of checking a patient's floor when the nurse's station erupted in whispers. She glanced over to see her co-workers clustered together, looking toward the elevators with wide eyes. "Is that him?" someone whispered. "It has to be. Look at that suit." Camille followed their gaze and felt her heart drop into her stomach. Julian was stepping out of the elevator, looking completely out of place in the hospital's fluorescent lighting. He wore a navy suit, crisp and expensive, and carried 2 brown bags that smelled suspiciously like Chinese food. Their eyes met across the hallway and Julian's face broke into a smile. He walked toward her, completely unaware of or unconcerned by the stares following him. "Hi," he said when he reached her. "Hi," Camille managed, acutely aware that every nurse and doctor on the floor was watching them. "What are you doing here? You mentioned you usually skip lunch on your shifts. I thought I'd fix that." He held up the bags. "Is there somewhere we can eat?" Camille's mind raced. She could feel her co-worker's curiosity burning into her back. There's a break room on the 3rd floor. It's usually empty around this time." She led him to the elevators, hyper-conscious of his presence beside her. In the enclosed space she could smell his cologne, expensive and subtle. Everything about him screamed wealth and privilege, and next to him in her wrinkled scrubs, Camille felt small. The break room was mercifully empty. Julian set the bags on the table and started unpacking containers of food. Lo mein, dumplings, sesame chicken, spring rolls. Enough food for 4 people. "This is too much," Camille said. "I didn't know what you liked, so I got everything." Julian pulled out a chair for her. "Please sit. You've been on your feet all morning." Camille sat, watching as Julian served her food on a paper plate. The gesture was simple but thoughtful, and it made her chest ache. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." Julian sat across from her, opening a container of lo mein. "I wanted to see you and I figured lunch was a good excuse." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The food was delicious, probably from some expensive restaurant downtown. Camille tried not to think about how much it must have cost. "Your co-workers were staring," Julian said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "They've never seen me with anyone," Camille admitted. "I keep my personal life private. And now they've seen you with a strange man in an expensive suit bearing Chinese food." Julian grinned. "The rumors are probably already spreading." Despite herself, Camille laughed. "You've made me the most interesting person on the floor." "Good. You deserve to be interesting." They finished eating and Julian helped Camille clean up, insisting on throwing away the containers himself. When it was time for her to return to her shift, Julian walked her back to the elevators. "Can I drive you home tonight?" he asked. "Your shift ends at 7, right?" Camille hesitated. Letting Julian see her apartment, her neighborhood, felt like opening a door she wasn't sure she wanted opened. But his face was so hopeful, so genuinely interested, that she couldn't bring herself to say no. "Okay," she agreed. "I'll meet you in the lobby at 7. Julian's smile was worth the anxiety. True to his word, Julian was waiting in the lobby at 7. He'd shed his jacket and tie and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows. Somehow he looked even better, slightly disheveled. They walked to the parking garage and Camille stopped short when she saw his car. It was sleek and black, something German and expensive that she couldn't even begin to identify. The kind of car that cost more than she made in a year. "This is yours?" she asked stupidly. "Company car," Julian said, opening the passenger door for her. "Comes with the job." Camille slid into the leather seat, feeling completely out of place. The interior smelled new, and there were more buttons and screens than she'd ever seen in a vehicle. Julian got in and started the engine, which purred rather than roared. "Where to?" Camille gave him her address, watching his face for any reaction. But Julian just nodded and pulled out of the garage. The drive to her apartment took 15 minutes through evening traffic. Julian didn't comment on the gradual change in scenery as they left downtown and entered her working-class neighborhood. He didn't flinch at the graffiti on some buildings or the groups of teenagers hanging out on corners. He just drove, occasionally asking Camille questions about her day. When they pulled up to her building, a modest red brick structure with 4 floors and no elevator, Julian turned off the engine. "Can I walk you up?" he asked. Camille's apartment was on the 3rd floor. "There's no elevator," she warned. "I think I can handle some stairs." They climbed the 3 flights in silence. Camille was hyper-aware of the peeling paint on the walls, the flickering light on the second-floor landing, the neighbor's television blaring through their door. This was her reality, and it was nothing like Julian's world. She unlocked her apartment door and stepped inside, Julian following close behind. The space looked even smaller with him in it, his height and presence somehow making the walls feel closer. "It's not much," Camille said, setting her bag on the small table by the door. "But it's home." Julian looked around slowly, taking in the modest furniture, the second-hand decorations, the photos of Camille's mother on the walls. His gaze stopped on the stack of medical bills on the kitchen counter. "Are those?" he started. "My mother's medical bills," Camille finished. "Don't worry about them." Julian walked over to the counter, and Camille wanted to stop him but couldn't find the words. He picked up the top bill, reading the numbers, his expression growing more concerned with each passing second. "Camille, this is $40,000. "I know." She moved to the counter, gathering the bills into a pile. "I'm on a payment plan." "It's fine." "It's not fine." Julian's voice was gentle but firm. "This is crushing you." "I'm handling it." Camille clutched the bills to her chest, feeling defensive. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity." Julian reached out, placing his hand over hers. "It's concern. Let me help you." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I can't accept that, Julian. I won't be someone you rescue because you feel sorry for her. I don't feel sorry for you. I'm amazed by you. You're carrying all this weight and still managing to smile, to be kind to everyone around you. But you don't have to do it alone." Camille felt tears threatening again. "If I take your money, what does that make me? What does that make us?" "It makes us people who care about each other." Julian cupped her face gently. "Please, Camille. Let me do this." She wanted to say yes. The weight of the debt was suffocating, keeping her up at night, making her choose between groceries and gas money. But accepting Julian's help felt like crossing a line, like admitting she couldn't take care of herself. "I need to think about it," she whispered. Julian nodded, dropping his hands. "Okay. But I'm not going anywhere. However long you need to think, I'll wait." He left soon after, but not before kissing her forehead, a gesture so tender it made Camille's heart ache. After he was gone, she sat on her couch, surrounded by bills and uncertainty, wondering if kindness could really be just kindness, or if it always came with strings attached. Camille didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying Julian's offer in her mind. "Let me help you." 4 simple words that carried the weight of the world. By morning, she still hadn't reached a decision. She went to work on autopilot, going through the motions of patient care while her mind churned with possibilities and fears. What would accepting Julian's help mean? Would he expect something in return? Would she become obligated to him in ways she couldn't predict? Her coworker, Patricia, a nurse who'd worked at County General for 15 years, noticed her distraction. "You okay, honey?" Patricia asked during their lunch break. "You seem a million miles away." Camille considered brushing her off, but something about Patricia's kind face made her open up. "If someone offered to help you with something big, something that would change your life, would you accept it?" Patricia stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Depends on the person and the strings attached. What if there were no strings? What if they just wanted to help because they cared about you? Then I'd wonder why I was so afraid of accepting kindness." Patricia looked at Camille directly. "Sometimes the hardest thing is letting people in. Letting them see our struggles and accepting their help. Pride can be just as destructive as debt, you know?" The words stayed with Camille throughout the rest of her shift. She was finishing her paperwork when her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. "Julian, can I see you tonight? I have something I want to propose." Camille's heart raced as she typed back. "Where?" "Julian, my place. I'll send a car at 7. Camille stared at the message. His place. She'd never been to Julian's home, had been actively avoiding thinking about where he lived. But maybe it was time to see his world fully, to understand the gap between them. "Okay," she responded. At exactly 7 o'clock, a black town car pulled up in front of the hospital. The driver, a professional-looking man in his 50s, greeted Camille by name and opened the door for her. She slid into the leather back seat, feeling like she was living someone else's life. The drive took them to the heart of downtown Chicago, to a gleaming high-rise that stretched into the sky. The driver pulled into an underground garage and escorted Camille to a private elevator. When the doors opened directly into Julian's penthouse apartment, Camille's breath caught. The space was enormous, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture. The view of the Chicago skyline was breathtaking, the city lights twinkling like stars. But despite its size and obvious expense, the apartment felt surprisingly warm. There were books scattered on tables, framed photos on shelves, a blanket draped over the couch as if Julian had been using it recently. Julian appeared from what must have been the kitchen, wearing jeans and a blue sweater. Casual Julian was somehow even more attractive than suited Julian. "You came," he said, smiling. "You sent a very nice car." Camille walked further into the space, trying not to gawk at everything. "This is too much," Julian finished. "Beautiful," Camille corrected. "But yes, also too much." Julian laughed. "I didn't choose it. My father bought this place as an investment, and insisted I live here. But I've tried to make it feel like home." He led her to the couch and they sat facing each other. Camille could see nervousness in his eyes, which somehow made her feel better. At least she wasn't the only one feeling uncertain. "I've been thinking," Julian started, "about what you said. About not wanting to be rescued. About pride and independence. And I understand that, Camille. I really do. But," Camille prompted. "But I have an idea. A proposal, actually." Julian leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "I want to help you with your mother's medical bills. And your car. And your rent. But not as charity." Camille felt her defenses rising. "Then as what?" "As payment for services." Julian held up a hand before she could protest. "Hear me out. I have to attend a lot of social events. Galas, charity dinners, business functions. I usually go alone because I can't stand the people in my circle. They're fake, superficial, only interested in status. But you're real. You're kind. You have genuine conversations. You want to pay me to be your date?" Camille asked, trying to process what he was suggesting. "I want to pay you to be yourself in situations where I need someone genuine by my side," Julian clarified. 3 months. You attend events with me and in return I pay off your debts, fix your car, and cover your rent for the next year." Camille stared at him. That's too much." "It's barely anything to me," Julian said honestly. "But it would change your life. And it would change mine too. I'd have someone I actually enjoy spending time with at these awful events." "Why me?" Camille asked. "You could hire someone professional. Someone who knows your world. Because you don't know my world, and that's exactly why I want you there." Julian reached for her hand. "Please, Camille. This benefits both of us. It's not charity. It's a business arrangement." Camille looked at their joined hands, thinking about Patricia's words. Sometimes the hardest thing is letting people in. She thought about her bank account, about the collection notices, about the constant anxiety of not having enough. She thought about the alternative, continuing to struggle alone, too proud to accept help, drowning slowly in debt. "What happens after 3 months?" she asked quietly. Julian's thumb stroked the back of her hand. "Whatever we want to happen. Maybe we'll want to continue the arrangement. Maybe we'll just want to be together without any agreement. Maybe we'll go our separate ways. No obligations after the 3 months." Camille met his eyes. "And you promise this isn't about anything else? No expectations beyond showing up to events?" "I promise," Julian said firmly. "If anything romantic happens between us during these 3 months, it'll be because we both want it, not because of any arrangement." Camille took a deep breath. Every logical part of her brain was screaming that this was a bad idea, that there had to be a catch, that she was getting in too deep. But another part, the part that was so tired of fighting every day, the part that maybe wanted to trust someone, was saying yes. "Okay," she heard herself say. 3 months. But I want a contract. Something that makes this official and clear." Julian's smile was brilliant. "Done. I'll have my lawyer draw something up this week." They spent the rest of the evening discussing details. Julian would provide appropriate clothing for events. He'd send a car to pick her up. He'd never expect her to compromise her work schedule. Everything would be documented and professional. When the town car dropped Camille back at her apartment that night, she felt like she was floating. She'd either made the best decision of her life or the worst. Only time would tell which. She texted Tanisha, "I need to tell you something crazy." Tanisha's response was immediate, "I'm coming over right now." 30 minutes later, Tanisha sat on Camille's couch, listening to the entire story with growing incredulity. "Let me get this straight," Tanisha said. "You kissed a stranger to escape my blind date setup, and that stranger turned out to be a billionaire who's now offering to pay your bills if you attend fancy parties with him?" "When you say it like that, it sounds insane," Camille admitted. Because it is insane. Tanisha stared at her. This is like something from a movie. I know. But Tanisha, this could solve all my problems. I could actually breathe for the first time in months. Tanisha's expression softened. I get that. I really do. Just, be careful, okay? Make sure you're protecting yourself. Get that contract. And if anything feels wrong, you walk away. I will, Camille promised. After Tanisha left, Camille lay in bed thinking about the next 3 months. She had no idea what Julian's world would be like, what these events would require of her. But for the first time since her mother died, she felt something that had been missing: hope. The contract arrived by courier on Thursday, delivered in a leather portfolio. Camille read through it carefully twice before signing. It was exactly as Julian had described: a professional agreement outlining her responsibilities and his compensation. 3 months with no obligations after the contract ended. Her lawyer friend from nursing school reviewed it and found no red flags. Julian texted her that evening. First event is Saturday. I'm sending over some options for you to wear. Options turned out to be an understatement. On Friday afternoon, 3 garment bags arrived at her apartment, each containing a beautiful dress. One was a deep red, elegant and flowing. Another was emerald green, fitted and sophisticated. The third was a royal blue, classic and timeless. All came with matching shoes and accessories. Camille tried them all on, standing in front of her bathroom mirror and barely recognizing herself. These weren't clothes she'd ever be able to afford. These were clothes that belonged on someone else, someone who fit in Julian's world. She chose the red dress for Saturday's event, which Julian had described as a charity gala for children's literacy. The car picked her up at 6, and this time Camille felt slightly more prepared, slightly less out of place. Julian was waiting in the lobby of the event venue, looking perfect in a black tuxedo. When he saw Camille, his expression made her glad she'd spent an hour on her hair and makeup. You look stunning, he said, offering his arm. You don't look so bad yourself, Camille replied, taking his arm and trying to ignore the flutter in her stomach. The gala was held in a grand ballroom, all crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths. Hundreds of people mingled, drinking champagne and talking in clusters. Camille recognized some faces from magazines and news articles. These were Chicago's elite, people who donated millions to charity and had their names on buildings. Breathe, Julian whispered as they entered. You belong here as much as anyone. But Camille didn't feel like she belonged. She felt like an imposter, playing dress-up in someone else's life. Julian seemed to sense her anxiety because he kept her close, introducing her to people with easy confidence, always including her in conversations. This is Camille Brooks, he'd say. She's a nurse at County General. And every time, people's faces would light up with genuine interest. They asked about her work, about her patients, about what it was like working in a busy city hospital. Camille found herself relaxing slightly, talking about the one thing she knew well. You're so different from the usual crowd, a woman named Barbara told her. Barbara was on the board of 3 charities and wore diamonds that could probably pay off Camille's debt twice over. Everyone here is usually a lawyer or a CEO or an heiress. It's refreshing to meet someone who actually helps people directly. By the end of the night, Camille had collected a dozen business cards and promises from people who wanted to support the hospital with donations. Julian watched her work the room with obvious pride. You're a natural, he said as they slow danced to the orchestra. His hand was warm on her waist and they moved together easily. I just talked about my job, Camille replied. Exactly. You were genuine. That's so rare in this world. Julian pulled her slightly closer. Thank you for being here. I'm getting paid to be here, Camille reminded him, though her heart wasn't really in the statement. Being in Julian's arms didn't feel like work. The second event was a business dinner where Julian's company was meeting with potential investors. Camille wore the green dress and sat beside Julian as he discussed profit margins and expansion strategies. She didn't understand half of what was being said, but she smiled and listened, occasionally asking questions that Julian later told her were surprisingly insightful. You made me look good tonight, he said in the car afterward. Thompson commented on how you helped him understand the humanitarian applications of our technology. He's investing. I just asked why it mattered, Camille said. Money is fine, but I wanted to know how it would help people. Julian looked at her with something in his eyes that made her breath catch. That's exactly why I wanted you here. The third event was an art gallery opening. The fourth was a charity auction where Julian paid $50,000 for a weekend at some tropical resort and then immediately turned to Camille and asked if she wanted to go with him when their contract ended. I'll think about it, she'd said, trying not to show how much the invitation meant to her. By the end of the first month, Camille had attended 8 events. Her medical bills were paid. Her car was fixed. Her landlord had received a check for the next year's rent. And Camille, despite every intention to keep this professional and distant, was falling in love with Julian Pierce. It wasn't just the money, though the financial relief had lifted a weight she'd carried for so long. It was the way Julian looked at her like she was the most interesting person in any room. It was how he always asked about her day, really listened to her stories about difficult patients or funny moments at work. It was the way he made her laugh, the way he held doors for her, the way he never made her feel less than despite their different circumstances. Are you Team Camille and Julian? Do you think their relationship can survive the differences in their worlds? Drop a comment below and subscribe to find out what happens when Patricia, Julian's ex, enters the picture. You won't want to miss what happens next. But Camille was also terrified. Because in 2 more months the contract would end, and she had no idea if Julian felt the same way she did. Maybe for him this really was just a business arrangement. Maybe she was reading too much into every tender look and gentle touch. Maybe she was setting herself up for heartbreak. Tanisha noticed the change in her. "You're glowing," she said one afternoon when they met for coffee. "And don't tell me it's just because your bills are paid. You're falling for him." Camille couldn't deny it. "Is that stupid?" "Maybe," Tanisha admitted. "But sometimes stupid and brave are the same thing." 7 weeks into their arrangement, Julian's ex-fiancée returned to Chicago. Camille first learned about Patricia Montgomery from a gossip article Tanisha sent her. The headline read, "Heiress Patricia Montgomery returns to Chicago after 2 years in Paris. Will she win back Billionaire X?" The article included photos of Patricia. Tall, blonde, perfect in that way only extremely wealthy people could be. She wore designer clothes like they were casual wear and had that confidence that came from never having to worry about money. "Don't worry about it," Julian said when Camille brought it up. They were having dinner at a small Italian restaurant Julian had discovered, far from the fancy places they usually went for events. "Patricia and I are done. We've been done for 2 years. The article says she's back to win you back," Camille pointed out. "The article is gossip." Julian reached across the table for her hand. "I'm not interested in Patricia. I haven't been for a long time." Camille wanted to believe him. But when Patricia showed up at their next event, a corporate dinner at Pierce Industries, Camille felt her confidence crumble. Patricia was everything Camille wasn't. She moved through the crowd like she owned it, knowing everyone, saying exactly the right things. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than Camille made in 6 months. And when she saw Julian, her face lit up with a smile that seemed genuine. "Julian," Patricia said, gliding over to them. Her voice had a slight French accent now, polished and sophisticated. "It's been too long." "Patricia." Julian's voice was polite but distant. "This is Camille Brooks." "Camille, Patricia Montgomery." Patricia's eyes swept over Camille, taking in her blue dress, her simple jewelry, her nervous smile. Something flickered in Patricia's expression, something that looked like calculation. "Lovely to meet you," Patricia said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Julian's told me nothing about you, which is curious." "We've been working together," Camille said, shaking Patricia's hand briefly. "Working together?" Patricia raised one perfect eyebrow. "How interesting. Julian's never brought his work home before." The comment stung, though Camille wasn't sure if it was intentional. Throughout the rest of the evening, Patricia stayed close, monopolizing Julian's attention, talking about people and events Camille knew nothing about. Every story Patricia told seemed designed to remind everyone that she and Julian shared a history, a world that Camille could never be part of. Julian tried to include Camille in the conversations, but it was clear he was torn between being polite to Patricia and protecting Camille's feelings. By the end of the night, Camille felt exhausted and small. In the car afterward, Julian took her hand. "I'm sorry about that. Patricia can be a lot." "She's beautiful," Camille said quietly. "So are you. Julian, she's from your world. She knows how to be in your world. I'm just temporary." Julian turned to face her fully. "You're not temporary to me." But Camille pulled her hand away. "Our contract ends in 5 weeks. Then what? I go back to my life, you go back to yours, and maybe Patricia fills the space I leave behind." "That's not what I want." Julian's voice was frustrated. "Camille, I thought you knew." "Knew what?" Camille interrupted. "We have a business arrangement, Julian. That's all this is." "Is that really what you think?" Julian asked. "After everything?" Camille didn't answer. She couldn't. because the truth was she didn't know what to think anymore. She'd been so careful to keep her heart protected, to remember that this was temporary, but somewhere along the way she'd stopped being careful. And now Patricia's return was a harsh reminder of reality. Over the next 2 weeks, Camille began pulling away. She was still professional at events, still smiled and charmed Julian's business associates, but the ease between them was gone. She declined his invitations to dinner, made excuses when he wanted to see her outside of contracted events. Julian noticed, of course. "Talk to me," he said after one particularly awkward gala. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Camille lied. "I'm just tired." "You're lying." Julian's blue eyes searched her face. "Is this about Patricia? Because I told you, there's nothing between us." "It's not about Patricia," Camille said, though that wasn't entirely true. "It's about me realizing that this was always temporary. In 3 weeks, our contract ends and we go back to our separate lives." "We don't have to," Julian said urgently. "Camille, I don't want this to end." But Camille was afraid. Afraid of hoping, afraid of believing, afraid of the inevitable moment when Julian would realize she didn't fit in his world and walk away. It was easier to pull away now to protect herself before it hurt too much. "I think we should keep this professional until the contract ends," she said quietly. "Then we can both move on." Julian looked like she'd slapped him. "Is that what you want?" "No," Camille thought. But instead she said, "Yes." The lie sat heavy in her chest for days afterward. She went to work, attended events with Julian, and went home to her empty apartment where she cried into her pillow. Tanisha tried to talk sense into her, telling her she was being foolish, but Camille couldn't seem to stop the self-destructive spiral. "You're scared," Tanisha said. "I get it. But pushing him away isn't protecting yourself. It's just ensuring you'll be alone." "I was always going to be alone," Camille replied. "People like Julian don't end up with people like me. Not in real life." "Who says?" Tanisha demanded. "Some rule book you made up?" "Camille, that man looks at you like you hung the moon. And you're throwing it away because you're afraid." But fear was powerful. And as the final week of their contract approached, Camille had built walls so high around her heart that she couldn't see a way to tear them down. The last event of their contract was a black tie gala at the Palmer House, one of Chicago's most prestigious hotels. Camille wore the blue dress, the one Julian had said was his favorite. It felt like armor and a farewell all at once. Julian picked her up himself instead of sending a car, which surprised her. He looked tired, she noticed. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there before. "You look beautiful," he said, but his voice lacked its usual warmth. "Thank you," Camille replied, keeping her tone neutral. "Professional." Say. The drive to the hotel was silent. Camille stared out the window at the Chicago streets, thinking about how different her life was now compared to 3 months ago. Her debts were paid. Her car ran smoothly. She'd built a savings account with the stipend Julian insisted on giving her for each event. Financially, she was in the best position she'd been in years. But emotionally, she felt broken. The gala was elegant, full of people Camille now recognized from previous events. They greeted her warmly, asking about the hospital, about her patients. Barbara, the woman from the first event, pulled Camille aside to tell her that her donation to County General had funded a new pediatric wing. "It's because of you," Barbara said. "Hearing you talk about those children and the lack of resources inspired me. You make a difference, Camille. I hope you know that." The words should have made Camille happy, but they just made her sad. She'd made a difference in so many lives over these 3 months, but she was about to walk away from the one person who'd made a difference in hers. Julian was across the room talking to a group of businessmen. Patricia was there too, stunning in a silver gown, laughing at something one of the men said. As Camille watched, Patricia touched Julian's arm, leaning close to whisper something in his ear. Julian's response was polite but distant. He stepped away from Patricia's touch, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on Camille. For a moment they just looked at each other across the crowded ballroom. Then Julian excused himself and walked toward her. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Somewhere private?" Camille's heart raced, but she nodded. Julian led her out of the ballroom and down a quiet corridor to an empty conference room. He closed the door behind them and suddenly the space felt very small. "I can't do this anymore," Julian said, running a hand through his hair. "I can't pretend that this is just business. I can't spend another evening watching you build walls between us." "Julian?" Camille started, but he held up a hand. "Please. Just let me say this." He took a breath. 3 months ago you kissed me in a restaurant to escape a blind date. It was impulsive and crazy and the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because of the kiss itself but because of who you are. You're kind, Camille. You're genuine. You see people really see them. And when you looked at me you didn't see a billionaire or a CEO. You just saw Julian. A man who was lonely and tired and desperate for something real. Tears were streaming down Camille's face now, but she didn't interrupt. These 3 months with you have been the happiest of my life, Julian continued. Every event, every conversation, every moment I got to spend with you felt like a gift. And I thought, I hoped you felt the same way. But then Patricia came back and you started pulling away and I realized you don't see what I see. What do you see? Camille whispered. I see a future, Julian said simply. I see coming home to you every night. I see supporting your career and you supporting mine. I see building something real together based on kindness and hope and love. Because I love you, Camille. I'm in love with you. And I think I have been since that first kiss. Camille couldn't breathe. You love me? Yes. Julian stepped closer. I love the way you care for your patients. I love how you remember everyone's names and ask about their families. I love that you wear thrift store dresses and don't care about designer labels. I love that you make me want to be better, to use my resources for good, to matter beyond just making money. I love you, Camille Brooks. All of you. The scared parts and the brave parts and everything in between. I'm not from your world, Camille said, her voice breaking. I don't fit in with Patricia and Barbara and all those people. You're wrong, Julian said. You fit better than any of them because you're real. Because you care about things that matter. Because you see the world not in terms of what you can take from it, but what you can give to it. But what about when you realize I'm not enough? Camille asked. When you get tired of explaining my background or my modest apartment or my simple life? Julian cupped her face gently, his thumbs wiping away her tears. Then I'll spend every day for the rest of my life proving to you that you're more than enough. That you're everything. Camille closed her eyes, feeling years of insecurity and fear warring with hope. I'm scared. I know. So am I. Julian's forehead touched hers. But I'm more scared of losing you. So please, Camille. Take a chance on me. On us. Camille opened her eyes, looking into Julian's blue ones, seeing nothing but honesty and love. And in that moment she made a choice. She chose hope over fear. She chose love over loneliness. She chose Julian. I love you too, she whispered. I've been in love with you for weeks. Maybe since that first kiss. Maybe since you brought Chinese food to my hospital and didn't flinch at my tiny apartment. Julian's smile was brilliant. Does that mean you'll give us a real chance? No contract, no business arrangement, just us. Yes, Camille said, and then Julian was kissing her. It was nothing like that first kiss in the restaurant. This kiss was full of promise and relief and love. This kiss was the beginning of everything. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Camille felt lighter than she had in months. What about Patricia? She asked. Patricia is part of my past. You're my future. Julian took her hand. Though I should probably tell her that officially. They returned to the gala together, hand in hand. Patricia was standing near the bar and when she saw them, her expression tightened. She walked over, her gaze sharp. So it's true, Patricia said. You and her. Her name is Camille, Julian said firmly. And yes, it's true. Camille and I are together. Patricia laughed, but it sounded bitter. Together? Julian, be serious. She's a nurse. She's nobody. She's the woman I love, Julian said. And if that makes her nobody in your world, then I don't want to be part of your world anymore. Patricia's face flushed. You're making a mistake. No, Julian said, squeezing Camille's hand. I'm making the best decision of my life. Patricia stared at them for a moment longer, then turned and walked away without another word. Camille felt Julian's arm wrap around her waist, holding her close. Are you okay? He asked. Camille looked up at him, at this man who'd seen past her circumstances to who she really was. I'm better than okay. I'm happy. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, it was completely true. 3 months after their contract officially ended, Julian took Camille to the same restaurant where she'd first kissed him. Romano's had become their place, the spot where everything began. They sat at the same bar where Julian had been nursing his whiskey that fateful night, and Camille couldn't help but smile at the memory. What are you thinking about? Julian asked, taking her hand across the table. How absolutely insane this all is, Camille admitted. 6 months ago I was drowning in debt and grief. Now I'm sitting here with you, happy and in love and wondering how I got so lucky. I'm the lucky one, Julian said. You changed my entire life, Camille. Before you, I was just going through the motions. Now every day feels purposeful. They'd spent the past 3 months building their relationship outside of galas and events. Julian had dinner at Camille's apartment, where they cooked together and watched movies on her old television. Camille had stayed at Julian's penthouse, though she still wasn't entirely comfortable with all the luxury. They'd found a middle ground, a balance between their two worlds. Julian had started using his wealth in ways that felt meaningful. He'd funded 2 new wings at County General. He'd set up scholarships for nursing students. He'd invested in community health clinics in underserved neighborhoods. And he credited all of it to Camille's influence. "You showed me what really matters," he told her one night as they lay in bed wrapped around each other. "Not profit margins or stock prices, but people. Lives. Hope." Now sitting in Romano's, Julian seemed nervous. His leg bounced under the table and he kept checking his phone, which wasn't like him at all. "Is everything okay?" Camille asked. "Yes," Julian said quickly. "Actually better than okay. I have something for you." He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Camille's heart stopped. It was a ring box. Julian opened it to reveal a beautiful diamond ring, elegant and simple, exactly Camille's style. "Before you panic," he said, "hear me out." "Okay," Camille managed, her voice barely a whisper. "6 months ago you kissed me to escape something you didn't want. Today I'm asking you to accept something I hope you do want. Camille Brooks, will you marry me?" Tears filled Camille's eyes. "Julian, I know this is fast. I know we've only been together for 6 months. But I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You're it for me, Camille. You're my best friend, my partner, my home. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you every day that you made the right choice in giving us a chance." Camille thought about how far she'd come. 6 months ago, she'd been too afraid to even go on a blind date. Now here she was, being proposed to by a man who loved her not despite her circumstances but because of who she was. "Yes," she said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." Julian slipped the ring on her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that felt like coming home. The other diners in the restaurant started clapping, and Camille realized they'd had an audience. But she didn't care. She was too happy to care about anything except the man holding her. They decided on a small wedding, just close friends and family. Tanisha was Camille's maid of honor, crying through the entire ceremony. Julian's father attended, looking slightly uncomfortable but ultimately happy for his son. Patricia sent a card but didn't come, which was fine with everyone. The ceremony was held in a small garden, all white flowers and sunlight. Camille wore a simple white dress that Julian had loved the moment he saw it. As she walked down the aisle toward him, she thought about that desperate night 6 months ago when she kissed a stranger to avoid a blind date. "I was running away from something," she said in her vows, "and I ran straight into you. You caught me, Julian. You saw me when I felt invisible. You loved me when I didn't think I was worth loving. And you showed me that kindness and hope and love aren't just words, they're choices we make every day. I choose you. Today and every day after." Julian's vows were equally emotional. "You taught me what it means to truly live," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just exist, not just go through the motions, but to live with purpose and heart. You make me want to be better. You make me believe in things I'd stopped believing in. And I promise to spend every day of our life together making you as happy as you make me." They sealed their promises with a kiss and everyone cheered. At the reception held in Julian's penthouse, Camille stood by the window looking out at the Chicago skyline. Julian came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Beyond happy," Camille said, leaning back against him. "Though I never thought I'd end up married to a billionaire. And I never thought I'd end up married to a woman who kissed me to escape a blind date." Julian spun her around to face him. "Funny how life works out." "Funny," Camille agreed, reaching up to cup his face. "Or maybe it's just that sometimes the best things happen when we least expect them. When we're brave enough to take chances. Like kissing strangers in restaurants?" "Exactly like that." They stood together, surrounded by friends and family, beginning their new life together. Outside, the city lights twinkled like stars. And Camille, who'd once felt like she was drowning, now felt like she was flying. Because she'd learned that sometimes kindness comes from unexpected places. Sometimes hope appears when you've almost given up. And sometimes love finds you when you're not even looking for it, in the form of a stranger at a bar who becomes everything you never knew you needed. And as Julian pulled her close for another kiss, Camille knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. That night in Romano's, when fear had driven her to do something crazy, had led her here. To love. To happiness. to home, to Julian. And that was worth every moment of fear, every second of doubt, every risk she'd taken. Because sometimes the best rewards come from the bravest choices. And kissing that stranger had been the bravest choice of her life.